I've been with my husband for the better part of 20 years. We dated for 10 of those and have been married for 8, 2 children accompanying us along the way. I still remember when we met on a field trip during high school to a zoo which sat outside of our city. He walked around with me for the entirety of the trip as we watched the silly monkeys swing from branch to branch, and we laughed at the elephant taking a 5-minute pee right in front of us. I recall how beautiful the cotton candy skies of pinks and blues swirled above our heads on the bus ride home. It was perfect, much like the past 18 years had been. My husband never gave me any reasons to be suspicious of him, whether that be cheating or something more sinister. No, as I said, the life we had built together was for the most part perfect. Of course, it wasn't without the usual relationship problems, like arguing and the occasional disagreements, but we always made it through. Outside of bickering about who has to take the trash out, or why the electric bill got paid a day late, we'd never had any major test of our relationship. At least, not until recently, that is. It was just another average day, a warm spring Wednesday, when I noticed the first cracks in my reality. I almost wish I hadn't pulled up the old family pictures to reminisce, to take a stroll down memory lane. Even if my life, my children, and my relationship were a lie, I still enjoyed every second of it. I was sitting at the kitchen table, golden rays of sunlight pouring in from the garden window as they covered us in a blanket of warmth. I sifted through the pictures we'd taken from the Polaroid camera which still sat somewhere tucked away in the house. My youngest daughter, Vira, sat next to me as she rummaged through the cardboard box labeled Memories, passing me the stacks of pictures we'd accumulated over the years. Sheesh, Mommy, you used to be so skinny. Kids never fail to give you their most honest opinion, even if it's a little too truthful. I giggled, trying my best to conceal my distaste for her comment. Yeah, I replied, rolling my eyes and sticking my tongue out at her. She laughed. As I flipped through the stacks of pictures, most of them being random pictures of our old dog, Ranger, I came across one of my husband, Sam, and I leaning against an old fence. His long black hair cascaded down over his shoulders in a curly mess. His arm was slung over my shoulder, a big grin on both of our faces. We were so young. The front door squealed open as heavy boots pounded the floor on their way in. It was Sam. His clothes were flecked with dirt and doused with oil from another hard day at the auto body shop. His blonde hair was matted down like a pile of greasy straw. That's when I noticed it for the first time. I looked down at the picture and up at him several times. The man who stood before me wasn't the one in the picture. It felt like all the air had been violently torn from my lungs. If I could have screamed, I would have. Sam must have noticed my shocked reaction. He seemed to tense up before snatching the picture from my hands. "What are you looking at these for?" he said, his brow furrowed. Hell, even the shape of his nose and eyebrows seemed completely off. I want to cry. "I just wanted to look at some old pictures," I finally croaked out, tripping over my words along the way. Whoever the man that stood before me was, I didn't want him to see my worry, my anxiety over catching him. How had I not noticed this before? The man gave me an odd look before looking down at the picture I was still clutching in my hands. His brow furrowed, eased into a surprised expression, his eyes turning big like silver dollars. "Wow, we sure have changed a lot, babe," he awkwardly laughed before continuing. "I'm gonna go hit the shower. I'm all sorts of gross." He quickly shuffled out of the kitchen into the bathroom down the hall. My mind began racing. Who is this man in my home? What happened to the real Sam? How did I not notice this before? All these questions swirled around my brain and converged at the center, creating a mess of thoughts I couldn't sort out. I brought my shaking hands upward, studying the image once more. Everything was wrong. Sam had long, black, curly hair which hung past his shoulders, a long nose which turned up at the end, and thick black eyebrows. His eyes were big and brown, piercing through me even in the old picture. The man in the kitchen had medium-length blonde hair, a large, wide nose, and light, almost transparent eyebrows. Perhaps the most obvious difference of them all was his bright blue eyes. The man also wore a beard, which was thick and full, darker than the rest of the hair on his face and head. There's no way that could be Sam. No one just changes like that. Even if they could, it still doesn't explain his eyes changing into a completely different color. I began sifting through more pictures. The next picture I found was of us a few years later, sitting around a fire and talking to my parents. Sam's hair looked different, like it was still long and black, but this time it was straight. I continued my search for more pictures, adamant to prove that the man in the house wasn't my husband. After a couple of minutes, I managed to find another picture of Sam, by himself this time, sitting on a lawn chair in our front yard drinking a beer. Two things were odd about this. Sam had always been, as far as I can remember, strictly against drinking alcohol. Secondly, his hair in this picture was shorter, a dark brown color and straight. Perhaps the most chilling thing, however, were his eyes. Instead of the deep brown color they had been in the earlier image, they appeared to be a dark green in this one. The last picture I found was one of Sam and our oldest daughter, Tara, standing in front of the Christmas tree in our living room. This particular one seemed to be from just a few years ago. Tara was no more than 8 in this picture. Sam stood, or rather stooped, with his arm over Tara's shoulder. They were both smiling. Sam in this picture had even shorter, lighter hair. His eyes were now the same color blue that the man in the kitchen had. I compared the first picture to this one, noting the distinct changes in facial structure between the two. I feel like I'm losing my mind. "Are you okay?" Vira said, which made me jump. I looked down at the little girl whose eyes were like saucers. I must have looked crazy rummaging through the memory box and wildly sifting through its contents. Yeah, I'm all right, honey. Just wanted to look at as many as I could before I start dinner," I replied, smiling weakly at my daughter. The shower stopped, leaving a deafening silence over the rest of the house. My heart pounded as I gathered the pictures and shoved them into my pocket. "Will you clean this up and put them away, please?" I instructed Vira, who sighed and groaned in response. "If you do, I'll let you have an ice cream sandwich after dinner." She seemed to perk up after hearing this as she half-assedly stacked the photos and tossed them back into the box. I was uneasy for the rest of the night, stiffening up every time the strange man would walk by me or pull me in for a hug or kiss. I tried my best to hide my disgust, my fear for whoever this was in our house. The most unnerving thing was watching him interact with my daughters, though they didn't seem to notice anything off. Weird. Dinner went by without a hitch, however it wasn't without awkwardness on my behalf. Everything and everyone else seemed fine. The kids were happy and the man seemed nice enough. He knew the kids' names and other things only my husband could know. Maybe it was Sam, maybe I'm just overreacting. I just don't understand how someone could change so much. The night settled in as darkness consumed the house. Bedtime. I stood in the bathroom, dousing my face in cold water, preparing to sleep in bed with the strange man. I decided it was best to study the pictures further tomorrow, after he left for work. I didn't want him to find out that I knew. I walked, shuffled stiffly to the door of our bathroom, nervous to open it. The door swung open before I could touch the handle. "Oh, hey," the man said, scratching the back of his head. "I gotta use the bathroom, you mind?" He stepped past me and shot me a look that indicated I should leave, so I did. I jogged as lightly as I could around the bed and hopped under the covers on my side. I looked under my pillow where I hid the pictures when Sam wasn't around, and made sure they were secure in their place. Turning the TV on, I flipped through the channels in an attempt to calm myself down. The door to the bathroom creaked open and out walked the man. He lazily threw himself onto the other side of the bed, groaning as he did so. If this wasn't my husband, he sure acted comfortable being in bed with me. He slid his hand down his pants and scratched his crotch before letting out a monstrous belch. "Sorry," he giggled. "What's up with you tonight?" he said, turning his gaze to me. I looked everywhere else but his eyes, feeling my face begin to burn as I tried to come up with a lie that would satisfy him. "I'm fine. Why do you ask?" I managed to get out. The longer I spent around the stranger, the more I wondered how I hadn't noticed this sooner. The more I thought back, trying to recall how long he'd been here, or if this was Sam, how long he'd looked this way, the foggier my memory seemed to get. Unease coursed through my veins. "Oh, well, you've just been distant tonight," he said, his eyes turning to the television. We watched a movie for a while before he finally drifted to sleep. My adrenaline pumping kept me awake through the rest of the night. I swear I could see him watching me from the corner of my eyes while we watched TV. The night dragged along for eternity. Sometimes I'd watch Sam as he snored in a deep sleep, or I'd turn the TV back on and watch another episode of my favorite series. Eventually, the glimmer of morning sunlight began peeking in through the blinds. I was the first out of bed that morning, obviously. I made my way to the kitchen and began preparing breakfast, hopeful to get this man out of our house as soon as I could. I had to get answers. After an hour or so of sitting at the kitchen table, sipping on a cup of coffee, Sam walked into the kitchen already dressed in his work outfit. "Hey babe, I got a call from work and I gotta leave a little early," he said before kissing my cheek and swiftly walking out of the house. It was like he could read my mind, knowing how badly I wanted him out. I took a little time to return to the bedroom, eager to return to my investigation. I spent most of the morning studying those pictures, trying my best to piece it all together. The girls didn't wake up until just before noon, sleeping in as much as possible while spring break lasted. By the time they emerged from their bedroom, I had already brought out the entire box of pictures, hoping I could add more to the timeline. Instead, I was shocked even further to find out that my daughters had changed as well. Am I going crazy? Tara walked lethargically into the kitchen, her feet falling like cinder blocks as she went. She just recently started drinking coffee, pouring some of the aromatic substance into her cup before sitting across from me at the table. That's when I noticed. The image I had in front of me was of Tara from just a couple years ago. Her hair was almost platinum blonde and wavy, accompanied by a pair of hazel eyes. The girl sitting across from me had deep red hair and dark brown eyes. Her entire facial structure seemed altered as well. Her long, thin nose now appeared wider and more upturned. I feel like my entire world is crumbling around me. That's the end of part 1.